When did you first hear about famines? The first time I came across the phenomena of famines in the Bombay Presidency was when I was researching about the urban development of 19th century Bombay. After years of research, it all came down to one commodity, wood, that was linked to the wider environmental crisis. Wood was one of the most important assets of the colonial government in Bombay to execute various infrastructural projects right from shipbuilding to railways, housing, bungalows, and making ornamental furniture. This research on environmental history was driven by my passion for nature and natural conservation. The contemporary ecological crisis, the current floods, famines, and global warming have profoundly influenced the historical investigation process. In the end, we might take some lessons from the past. Climate change, the frequently uttered environmental term, literally refers to a long term change in the statistical distribution of weather patterns over decades caused by human activity. By definition, then, climate change by itself is a historical concept. Climate change occurs in a domino effect, with one occurrence sending off a series of environmental changes into motion. While the evident factors are known, a historical analysis of this area reveals an unknown and often interlinked underbelly of climate change. The reason for famine is not the drought alone, but inadequate and inactionable policies are also to be held accountable. The indiscriminate land use policy of the colonial as well as the post colonial governments has impacted the environment at large, and history gives ample evidence that many man made factors are at the root of tilling, producing, and operating land, which has a major impact on our climate. One of the pioneers in environmental history, Richard Grove, traces the emergence of ideas like climate change and desiccationism to tropical colonies like India. Desiccationism is a set of ideas about the relationship between people and the environment. It implies there is a connection between the depletion of green cover and the phenomena of droughts, soil erosion, and generalized climate change. The idea first developed initially on the small island colonies of the Portuguese and Spanish at the Madeira and Canary Islands. The idea was first mooted by the Greek naturalist Theophrastus in his essay on deforestation and climate change. These essays were translated and published widely during the Renaissance in the 14th century. Climate change, it was believed, threatened not only the economic well being of a colony but posed health hazards to the settler population of the plantation colonies of the Caribbean and the Indian Ocean. This concern and anxiety compelled the colonial government to initiate forest protection measures in their colonies. However, a major stimulus to forest protection activities occurred in the 19th century. Wood was sourced from the Western Ghats, from the forest of Maharashtra, Gujarat, Karnataka, and Kerala for the infrastructure development of Bombay, resulting in recurrent famines in India in the 19th century. During the colonial era in India, the reason why there was mass degradation of forest was because the British lacked scientific forestry. Most of the afforestation programs were commercially oriented, where plantation of trees of commercial importance were undertaken. Such monocultural plantation affected the biodiversity of the region. A panic-stricken colonial government began innovative investigation into the causes of the severity of the drought that resulted in German foresters like Brandes, known for sustainable development through scientific means, being employed in the 1870s to regenerate the forest of the Bombay Presidency. A written report of the Indian Foreign Commission of 1880 was also produced. This report clearly highlighted that the reasons for drought was the extensive deforestation, and this increased British interest in health and climate. Well, what are the actionable things we can learn from the past to prevent famines today? The colonial foresters heavily relied on the corpus of Western scientific knowledge to manage the forest of India. To ensure a sustainable quality of timber, they introduced silvicultural practices, that is, thinning and weeding, for enhancing the qualities of trees in the forest. They even initiated the share system, although experimented in certain regions of Thane and Pune, whereby the village heads entered into an agreement with the forest department to conserve the teak trees around the villages in exchange of permission to cut the trees for rub used for cultivation and take 1/4 of the net proceeds during the periodic felling. The British also began forest schools where a number of inspectors and foresters were put through a course of instruction in planting, in formation of nurseries, opening of pits for sowing teak, and also growing young trees. This experiment was so successful that some young Englishmen in the age group of 17 to 23 were allowed to give the examination before the civil service commissioners, and 40 such promising candidates were sent to France and Germany to undergo training in the management of forest and the science of forestry, surveying, road making for 2 to 5 years. To counter the aversion of the peasants, the forest department tries various kinds of incentives by giving them rewards for undertaking plantation to the tune of rupees 40 to 100. They added a financial aspect to conservation and drew the interest of communities near the forest. The British assisted sustainable projects monetarily because they were commercially beneficial. The questions we have to ask today then is, can sustainability instead be commercialized like it was done in the past? Do we then have to change the narrative around commercialization of sustainability? The solution lies in developing strategies to maintain this delicate balance between the developmental activities and environment conservation. The lesson to learn from history is to understand how the British was successful in conserving the forest and making it sustainable in a scientific manner towards the end of the 19th century through their afforestation programs. They also learned from the other cultures like the Germans, who were known for their scientific forest regenerative policy. Currently, I think that we need to go back to our roots to take our environment seriously, preserve our sacred groves, and at the same time, India should also look at cultures that are conserving forest in a sustainable manner. For example, in Sweden, the felling rate is less than the growth rate. In Bombay, there is not much wood left to be used for public projects like the metro building and civic construction. Such projects generally require trees to be slashed to execute them with or without having a sustainable balance between the cityscape and the natural environment. There are some important steps must be taken to ensure the continued survival of the natural heritage and increase awareness of their history, and this natural heritage is of utmost importance. When official bodies are formed by the government to conserve the environment, it is essential to include the historians too. We need to find a new sustainable way of development for human society, paying special attention to harmonizing the relationship between humankind and nature. Individuals and community initiative needs to be brought into the mainstream. Conserve trees, grow more trees, engage in silvicultural practices, refrain from using plastics, separate garbage at source. A few things that an eco-friendly individual can begin with. Ultimately, what have human beings given to nature who has given them so much in abundance? Therefore, the need of the hour is to cry halt to the process of senseless environmental destruction, lest the environmental crisis should engulf us. Just like we cannot afford to have a nuclear war as that will annihilate humanity, we cannot afford to further damage our environment. Human existence largely depends on this healthy environment, especially as we move forward into an era of large scale urban development. Nature needs to be recognized as a core element of quality of life and progress of mankind.